So the birthplace of bourbon, right here in Virginia, we let them finish in there for about 3 to 6 months. And after we take the bourbon out, it's now got this beautiful sweetness. The Italian genes, we show our love through food. Just the history alone of it is one of my favorite things to talk about because we can now expand our distillery up to Fredericksburg. It's the same thing it's always been, and that's try to make the best bourbon we can.
Welcome back. My name is Joe Winger. Today we're here with Owen King from the Ironclad Distillery and the Ironclad Inn and Bourbon Tasting Room. Learn more at ironcladdistillery.com. Owen, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Owen, a lot of really cool things are happening right now, and I want to jump into your tasting room, the distillery. We're going to get into bourbon tastings in a few minutes. But first and foremost, what's the most important thing with Ironclad right now for you?
The most important thing about Ironclad for me right now is, it's the same thing it's always been, and that's try to make the best bourbon we can. The other thing is kind of spreading the word about our bed, breakfast, and bourbon. It's a bed and breakfast in Fredericksburg that when you're there, you can drink bourbon. We make a lot of old fashions there, and we always have all these leftover oranges, and now like the perfect thing is in the morning you have fresh squeezed orange juice from our old fashions. So it's a working double duty now. But besides that, I just love the fact that we can now expand our distillery up to Fredericksburg, so we can kind of have more people try our bourbon and enjoy our bourbon, which is the goal.
Now, getting to know you for a second before we jump into Ironclad, I want to use the word were. You were a football player, and cooking changed your life. If that's true, tell us more about who you were before the cooking. Was there a special dish? What is it about cooking that enhanced your life so much?
So I'm Italian. So obviously, with the Italian genes, we show our love through food, and so growing up, I cooked a lot, and when I went to college for my teammates, I'd have them over. I'd make dinner for everyone, and so then when we decided we were going to open the bourbon distillery, I figured, I know how to cook. I think I could kind of probably figure out how to make bourbon. And so it was just kind of the tie-in of like, I know flavors, I know how things go well together. I think I have a pretty decent palate. So just kind of putting all those things together to make great bourbon was the goal. And so food is one of those things where you can always never stop improving. I feel the same about bourbon. It's a constant learning how to tweak something here, tweak something there, just to make the greatest thing possible.
Is there a favorite dish that you kind of learned on?
It was always like breaded chicken cutlets and spaghetti. And so like that it started as that, and so I do Prego breadcrumbs and crappy canned tomato sauce. And so I do those things. And then I was like, well, I really like cheese. Maybe I could put cheese in with the breadcrumbs and then do that. And so then I started expanding off a little that way. And then I was like, well, I really like chicken parm. Maybe I could do chicken parm. And then if I'm going to do chicken parm, then I should probably make my own sauce. So then I'd find the sauce recipe. And then I'm like, okay, well, I like this way. I like the way this sauce is made, but maybe I could add something here to make that better. And so it's kind of the same way I look at the bourbon, where it's just like, okay, I like what this person's doing. Let me see what they're doing. I can kind of build off that to kind of make it work in my own recipes, and going from there to kind of just continually tweak little things here and there that aren't going to make drastic flavor differences, but will make maybe a 5% difference, maybe a 10% difference for every little one.
I love that. I love the tweaking, and I love how your palate kind of works with the process. We're here with Owen King. Owen, your distillery, Ironclad, is in Newport News, Virginia. The bed and breakfast Ironclad Inn is in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I don't think I think for most people, when we think of bourbon, we don't always think of Virginia as the first choice. So tell us a little bit about what would surprise us most about coming down to Virginia for a bourbon tasting and staying the night.
Well, if you're coming down to Virginia, you have to remember Virginia is the birthplace of American spirits. So the first place spirits were made in the new colonies, in the new world, was here in Virginia. Also, on that topic, the first corn liquor, which would eventually become bourbon, was made in Virginia. And you can also talk about Elijah Craig, who was from Fairfax County, Virginia, before he moved out to Kentucky. And then on top of that, Kentucky wasn't a state until 1793. Evan Williams, I believe, was doing distillation in 1783. And at that point, Kentucky was still Virginia. So the birthplace of bourbon, right here in Virginia. I've been to Kentucky a lot. They've talked about the birthplace of bourbons here, Kentucky. Maybe the territory, the area it's in, that was Kentucky, but it was still Virginia at the time. So birthplace of bourbon right here in Virginia. I like to make sure whenever someone comes by that I can tell them the history of actual bourbon, where you're going to get the whole story, not just the fantasized story that you get in Kentucky.
I got to tell you, I'm incredibly glad you just shared that. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Owen King, the distiller of Ironclad Distillery in Newport News, Virginia. Tell us about the Ironclad Inn, the bourbon tasting room, the event space.
Yeah. So we wanted to spread our bourbon out around the state. We've always really liked Fredericksburg. It's a beautiful town, and it's got a ton of history to it. And we always think nothing goes better with bourbon than a good story. So we can always tell history while drinking, and which is always a very important thing to do while telling history, because then the history gets a little more fantasized. And so if you with our bed and breakfast, we kind of looked at what the bigger guys were doing, and a lot of them were starting to have these places where you could stay and get an experience to go along with it. And so we really wanted to spread our Ironclad experience. So we have a tasting room. It's beautifully decorated by my sister. We've got a bottle shop where you can pick up pretty much every one of our bourbons that are available. We've got a bar, so you can try from our seasonal cocktail menus, where we change it 5 times a year. So we have a winter, a fall, or a winter, spring, a summer, and a fall, and then a holiday menu as well. And so no matter what time of year you're there, you're trying something that's going to go seasonally, which is everyone likes to drink seasonally. So you don't necessarily want to drink what you're drinking in fall and what you are in summer. So maybe a little slightly more fruity drinks, but we always have an old fashioned, and it's a damn good old fashioned. And so then we also have an event space. So we're gonna have we've had weddings, we've had 50th birthday parties, we've had anything. So anything that you want to tie into tie in bourbon with, or just if you want a beautiful event space that in a building that was built in 1793. We have that as a great option. So it's a really cool spot that you can go and see and experience, and it's just something we want to share our love for bourbon with everyone. So whether you're here in Newport News or there in Fredericksburg, you'll get a King family member there to kind of tell you our story and tell you all about our bourbon, and show you around whatever you want to see.
Let's get to the tasty part now, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
You have several amazing bottles. I've tasted a few. When someone comes to your tasting room this weekend, what should they be looking forward to? Let's talk through some of your bottles.
So we do a few bottle releases that are a once a year release for us. The one we're running a little low on, but we still have a decent amount. Is our bottle and bond. So that was one of the ones I sent you. It's one of my favorites. So we release it every year for our anniversary. So that was in March. This is a 5-year, 3-barrel blend of 3 30-gallon barrels. And Bottle and Bond, just the history alone of it is one of my favorite things to talk about, because in 1897, there was the federal government stepped in because there was a whole bunch of people dying from drinking bad whiskey. And so they didn't care, the federal government didn't care about taking Coke out of Coca-Cola or cocaine out of Coca-Cola. They cared about people dying from bourbon. So the first thing they stepped in, they said, what you're going to do is you'll give us a key to your warehouse. We're going to go in and certify everything in there. And then if you bottle it at 4 years old and at 100 proof, we will claim that this is a bottle and bond bourbon certified by the federal government that it is safe to drink. And so that story alone just is one of my favorites of the bourbon, bourbon lore. And so we just want to make sure that we do that every year that we can. And it's just absolutely one of my favorite bourbons. So it's our 4-grain mash bill. So it's 70% corn, 10% wheat, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. So with the corn and the wheat, it adds kind of a nice sweetness to it. But then the rye is there to kind of balance that whole thing out. So before it gets kind of like a very sweet bourbon, it kind of balances out with a little baking spice, maybe even some clove, maybe a little black pepper as well. That kind of balances it out to be this nice, well-rounded bourbon.
I absolutely agree with the baking spices, but it's very well balanced. But it's easy to drink, which is both a good thing and very slow.
That's a great thing, yeah.
So let's move on to your maple syrup cask. Tell us. I mean, this is absolutely delicious, but tell us more about it.
This is a cask finish. It's not a flavored bourbon, so we're not adding maple syrup to it. So people who drink it might think, or going into it might think, oh, this is going to be super sweet. I'm not going to like it because I don't like maple syrup. But I love maple syrup, and this is my version of drinking maple syrup responsibly, and by not getting diabetes. So what I do is I give our barrels after we empty our barrels, we give our barrels to a maple syrup producer in upstate New York. I think he's up to about 15,000 maple taps now. And so he'll age his maple syrup in our used bourbon barrels. And so by doing that through transference, so when we empty a bourbon barrel, there's about a gallon of bourbon stuck in the staves of the wood. So now when he puts a new liquid in there, that maple syrup is going to absorb into the wood, and that bourbon's going to come back out. So now his maple syrup is picking up that beautiful bourbon flavor, and we are picking up all that maple syrup flavor into the wood. So now when he brings those barrels back down to us, we put our aged bourbon back in there, and we let them finish in there for about 3 to 6 months. And after we take the bourbon out, it's now got this beautiful sweetness, or mild sweetness, but it's got that hint of maple syrup at the end. I always say I don't want you to drink. I don't want it to be maple syrup with a hint of bourbon. I want it to be a bourbon with a hint of maple syrup, which is, I think, absolutely what it is.
That's amazing. Yeah, the maple syrup is just such a subtle, almost a tertiary flavor to it. You gotta have to look for it, but when you look for it, my gosh, it pairs so well.
Yeah,
I love that. And then moving on to the Missouri Toasted Oak Cask.
Yeah. So this is a double oak bourbon. And so with double oaking, what you're going to do is it is exactly how it sounds. You're going to go from one new charred oak barrel, but instead of a second new charred oak barrel, we're going to go to a nicely lightly toasted barrel. So my analogy for this is you're sitting at a campfire and you've got a marshmallow. So you're roasting your marshmallow over the flame, and it gets burnt and it catches on fire. So now you've got that roasted marshmallow, where you're like, okay, I'm still gonna eat this because it's a roasted marshmallow. I'm out of fire. That's what I want to do. So you eat it, and it's still sweet, but it's got that sort of maybe a bitter, acrid note, just because you've burnt those sugars, you haven't toasted them. Now you take another marshmallow, and you're a little more patient this time. So this time you're going to stick it down in the coals, and you'll slowly rotate it. And now you've got that perfectly golden brown marshmallow. And so when you taste it, it's now twice as sweet because you just caramelize those sugars as opposed to burning them. So it's the same with a charred oak barrel to a toasted oak barrel. So with that charring of those oaks, you're still gonna have that sweetness, but now we're amplifying that sweetness with the toasting of the oak. So with this one, you get that you still get those kind of softer vanilla flavors like toasted marshmallow, but I always say you kind of get like a cookie dough flavor on it as well, where maybe it's like raw cookie dough without the chocolate chips. You're getting that exact flavor in.
Oh, that's amazing. You're very good at this. I think you know that, but my gosh, you're good. I love your flavors.
Thanks.
So we're in the tasting room. I know those are the three we went through, but is there an extra bottle that I come down there? I'm in the tasting room. We're on out for the weekend. Is there a good bottle that you pull out for the special occasions that we should ask for?
The other one that we have right now that is a very limited run. It's a very small release that we only do once a year. Is our blueberry mead cask finish. So this one is we give our barrels to a meadery in Williamsburg, Virginia, and they make this blueberry honey mead. And so what they do with that is then that we give our barrel, same process, give our barrels to them. So now they have this bourbon barrel aged blueberry mead. And so then when they're done with them, they give them back to us. So this one, every year I produce it and release it. I'm always like, oh gosh, I forget how good this is. And you're not necessarily getting overwhelmed with this like heavy blueberry flavor, but it opens up to this really nice fruitiness and then like a fermented honey flavor on the front end. It's so unique and so different. But it's great neater on the rocks. That's how I pretty much drink predominantly all my bourbons. But this one makes a hell of an old fashioned. And so if you're feeling froggy and you want to do something special, ask for it in an old fashioned. And it'll blow your mind. It's going to be spectacular.
Old fashioned is my love language, so I'm right there with you.
Perfect.
Owen King, the distiller of Ironclad Distillery, also now Ironclad Inn, the bed and breakfast in Fredericksburg, Virginia. If we come down for the weekend, we visit the distillery in Newport News. What's a tour like? What do we learn? What do we get to taste? What's that experience like?
I really want people to, if they're not the biggest bourbon drinker, I want you to walk away saying, okay, I've found something that is made with bourbon that I like. So I want to, we are a distillery that only makes bourbon. So I want to make sure that everyone who comes here has something they can enjoy. I don't want to, say, oh no, you can only drink bourbon neat here. I don't want to be this very uppity bourbon bar, but I want someone to come say and be like, okay, I'm not the biggest bourbon fan. Let me try, what kind of cocktails do you have? And we have a cocktail on every single menu that's open for everyone. Everyone's going to love it, and whether a big bourbon fan or not. So we just really want to be accommodating. We want to be a fun place for everyone to hang out. We want to tell the history of the Ironclad ship. So if you go through our tour of our distillery, we'll show you that. If you want to know the history of Fredericksburg or the history of what the bed and breakfast is, we'll tell you that. So, nothing pairs better with bourbon than a good story, and we really care about spreading that word.
That's awesome. I like that line. So whether it's a romantic getaway, a weekend getaway, I often choose a bed and breakfast because it's a different type of stay than just a normal hotel.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the Ironclad Inn and what makes it different and special, and perhaps maybe a story of someone who stayed there recently and how it was different and better than a hotel.
Well, the one thing we've kind of started putting our own touches on it because we've only had it for a short amount of time, but we've been adding things here and there. So, like I was saying earlier, now you're going to get a fresh squeezed orange juice in the morning, whether if you so choose, and that's made with the oranges that we use for our old fashions. We have our barrel aged maple syrup there for your pancakes, so you're going to have that maple syrup with a hint of bourbon. So we're really driving home that it's a bed, breakfast, and bourbon experience. So when you're there, you're going to get immersed into, whether you like it or not, the bourbon the bourbon culture. And so that's kind of our goal. And I mean, eventually down the road, we're looking to have a bourbon cart where if it's after hours and you're looking for a nip, we can do that. So it's something that isn't necessarily there yet, but very soon it'll be put in place. So yeah, we want it to be a fun place that you're going to be able to see downtown Fredericksburg and Fredericksburg in general. But you're also going to get to experience being immersed in the bourbon culture.
Again, I love all of this. If I get a plane ticket, I could be there in 36 hours for the weekend. I'm an excited guy. So thank you for
We'd love to have you.
Oh my gosh, you're very sweet. Earlier we talked about food, we talked about bourbon. Let's combine them both. And because of your palate, any favorite bourbon and food pairings? If you want to pick one of your bottles specifically and say this bottle with this meal, but what's on your mind when you think pairings?
So I mean, bourbon's wonderful for food pairings. We've done so many different ones. We've gone from doing pasta pairings to pizza pairings to the one I'm currently working on is a Bulgarian bourbon. But anything that's fatty is a perfect pairing. So pork belly with like a cherry reduction over top of it, and probably one of our bourbons, probably our straight, maybe even the bottle and bond would be like a perfect like bite. And so we also have this bourbon cream. It's called Buzz's Bourbon Cream, where it's made with our small batch bourbon that's infused with coffee beans, cacao nibs, and vanilla beans. That one over vanilla ice cream is like perfection. You're adding a little booze, some coffee, a little bit of chocolate, and it's just like you take a bite, and all of a sudden you had 3 scoops, and like now it's gone like 30 seconds later, and you're like, wow, why am I also slightly drunk?
Oh my gosh, all good stuff. We're here with Owen King, the distiller of Ironclad Distillery and Ironclad Inn, a bed and breakfast and bourbon tasting room. As we wrap up, Owen, what's the best way someone's hearing about the food and the bourbon? They want to come visit, they want to learn the history, they want to stay for the night. What's the best way to learn more about Ironclad Distillery and Ironclad Inn?
So we have our website, ironcladdistillery.com. It's a best way to find out everything that's going on with us. All of our social media, Facebook and Instagram, Ironclad Distillery. Best way to keep up. Both those will lead you right to us, and with all the information you might need. So we're easy to find, and we look forward to hosting anyone who comes to see us, and we'll treat you just like family when you're here.